Okay, before I start today's ultimate Amiga OS setup guide for Windows PC, if you like what you see today, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content here on my channel, just Jamie. That means you'll get notified every time I release a new setup guide, and it really helps out my channel too, for which I'm really appreciative of. So today we're looking at setting up Amiga OS 4.1 Final Edition. That's the latest Amiga OS. So it's debated amongst the community if it's a legit Amiga distribution. But anyways, that is the Final Edition, which is Amiga OS 4.1. So we're going to need a copy of that, and I'm going to show you where to get that in a minute. For this setup guide, we're also going to require Amiga Forever, and again, I'm going to show you that in a minute. We also going to need AmiKit. So AmiKit, I'm also going to show you where to get that, and there's several different versions of that we need. And finally, we're going to need a little program known as FlowerPot. What FlowerPot is going to do is allow us to install Amiga OS 4.1 on this setup guide. So we're going to go through that all individually. So there is a few things that we're going to require. So what we're going to do first of all then, before anything, is just take a look at AmiKit. So if we take a look at the offers here, we got AmiKit 12 Plus, which is currently €29.95. We also got different combos and super combo offers just here. Now let me just make you aware that we do need FlowerPot. So we got different offers for free flower pots in that type of thing. Really, if you're just going to be using this for one system, then just go for the cheapest as possible. But we do need that FlowerPot program. If we scroll downwards and click on the free X edition, which is actually what I'm using today. If we take a look here, pay what you want, $9.95 recommended. If we just go to add to cart, and bear in mind, we can do this through Mac OS 2 as well as Linux computers. Let's just go to add to cart on Windows. Now, if I just take away $9.95 and replace this with whatever, we can then go to pay, and that should then download your AmiKit X, and that'll be the same process if you want to upgrade to, say, AmiKit 12, which is going to actually offer you lots of updates for a year, plus lots of different features. So take a good look at that. Now the next thing we are going to need to is Amiga Forever. Again, you need to pay for this one. Now let me tell you why you're going to need Amiga Forever. It contains lots of different files which we're going to use, and it's mandatory to use in this setup guide. Now if we just go here, we're going to go for the Plus edition. You can buy this, and as you can see, as I'm recording this video, it's €39.95. So you can download that, and like I said, it's unlikely you're going to get all the files that's required for this setup guide without it. So I'm going to leave the link in my description for that. Next thing we are going to need then is Amiga OS 4.1. So we can actually download this, and again, you've got to pay for this. So this one's $29.95. If we get Amiga OS, you can choose where you want to buy this from. Anyways, what I've done is ripped mine into an ISO image for this setup guide. So what we need then in total is AmiKit, and like I say, I'm using AmiKit X. We're going to need Amiga Forever, which I've covered on my channel, and it really is a great application for Amiga fans. We're also going to need that little program called FlowerPot, which you can actually buy through AmiKit. And we're going to need Amiga OS 4.1. So let's just assume then that you've got everything just here, just like I have. We got Amiga Forever, AmiKit, FlowerPot, and we got that Amiga OS in ISO format. So let's start then. So what we're going to do first is open up AmiKit. Okay then, so the first thing you're going to see once you open up AmiKit X setup is for AmiKit to work, you do need Amiga OS and ROM. So this is why I say you need Amiga Forever, because it's got all those Kickstart ROMs and everything else we're going to need, and of course Amiga OS. Now let's just say you've got an older version of Amiga OS, it's also going to work as well, but I'm using 4.1 as we know. So we're going to go to next. Next thing we're going to do is select installation folder for everything to go into. So by default, this is going to go into my C drive and my program files x86 folder. What I'm going to do for this guide is right click on my desktop, new folder, and I'm going to call this folder Amiga. You can call this whatever you want. But we're going to go to browse and we're going to point the installation to go into that Amiga folder like I've just done there. Select folder and we're going to go to next and install. If you see any pop-ups appear, then just press yes on these. Okay, so thank you for using AmiKit. Everything is done. Next thing we're going to do is just left click on locate suitable ROM on your disk. So if we just left click this one and we're going to go to finish. Okay, so this is why we need Amiga Forever just here. What we need to do is make sure the start directory is pointed in the Amiga Forever's ROM location. If you've got Amiga Forever, right click on the shortcut, open file location. From here you're going to find, or you should find, a shortcut for Amiga files. If you double left click on this one, we're going to go into the shared folder, down to the ROM folder, and here is all the goodness. This is what we need. Now just make a note just here that we've actually got a file here which is Ralph Schmidt Cyberstorm PPC. So just make sure that one's there because that one's very important for this. Let's just focus very briefly on the Ralph Schmidt Cyberstorm. As we can see just there under the size, it's going to say 0 kilobytes. So what we need to do is actually make sure the size of this one is actually correct. So what we're going to do then is just minimize this and we're going to open up Amiga Forever. So let's go to Amiga Forever. We're going to go to Systems, and in Systems you're going to find Amiga 4000 PPC. Just open this one up, so double left click. Okay, so Power PC Boot, just OK this. And what we're going to do next is just close this down. So our mouse is actually trapped. What we're going to do is hold on to the escape button, and we can then use the cursor. So just close this down and OK. And if we close out of Amiga Forever and we go back into the Amiga Forever ROMs folder, so remember, right click on Amiga Forever, open file location and Amiga files. We're going to go into shared folder and down to ROM. Now if we take a look at that Schmidt file again, we're going to notice that this is now gone up to 128 kilobyte in size, which is very awesome. That's what we want. Okie doke. So next thing we're going to do then is go back to the AmiKit ROM finds, which I was just on a minute ago. As we can see just here, this is maybe the wrong location. So we do need to ensure this is the correct location. So just to be safe, what I'm going to do is just backspace that default directory and just go back into the Amiga Forever directory, open file location, Amiga files, shared, and into the ROM folder. If you just left click at the search bar at the top, so it highlights everything, right click and copy, we can then go back to the start directory here in ROM find and just paste that location in. Next thing we're going to do is go to search. And ROM description, KS ROM v3.1 A1200. Cool beans. So we're going to press install on this. And that's going to close everything down. That's absolutely fine and we're on the right track. Okay, so what we're going to do next then is open up AmiKit X. And as we can see, this has actually created a shortcut. So just to remove any type of confusion here, let's just take away the setup because they both look very similar. If we just right click on the setup just here and delete that, move it to trash and open up AmiKit X. So we're going to go to launch. Okay, so as we can see, we got WinUAE open now with AmiKit centered in the middle, just telling us about different operating systems. What we can actually do is make this full screen. So you can either press F12 to bring you into the WinUAE menu, or in my case, I've got FN button. I'm going to press that and press my F12 button together. So we're now inside of WinUAE properties. What we're going to do is go to display, and from here under settings, we can put this to full screen. Whoops, full screen and RTG full screen. If I then go to OK, as you can see, we're now in full screen. First thing we're going to do then just here is install OS 4.1 FE, that's Final Edition. Left click. Now it's asking us to insert an ISO image file, and I've already got that on my desktop for 4.1. So what we're going to do next is, again, just press FN as well as F12 simultaneously. And just here, what we're going to do is go to CD and hard drives. Okay, so once we're in CD and hard drives, I've just altered the size of this so I can see what I'm doing. We got optical media options just here, CD drive. So what we're going to do is go to select image file, and we're going to point this into the direction of my ISO image of Amiga OS 4.1. So I'm going to just scroll down. This is actually on my desktop. So we got classic install CD. Just double left click and then go down to OK. And this is going to bring us back to Amiga DOS, as we can see. It tells us to press enter. So press enter. Next thing you should see is talking about screen modes. What we're going to do for now is just press enter to reboot. Okay, we now got screen mode preferences turned up. So what I'm going to do is just drop this down, and I'm going to select 1920 by 1080, which is right at the bottom, 32-bit BGRA. I'm then going to go to save. And as it says, press enter and get ready to be amazed. Okay, so this is AmiKit X. First thing we're going to see is AmiKit Live Update. Now just remember, if you've got the more lower end version, which I'm using here, the AmiKit X version, things might look a little bit different if you're using the version 12. What we're going to do is just download updates for version X. Okay, so AmiKit Live Update, we're just going to press OK here and close this down. And if we then go to quit, so this is AmiKit X and everything works perfectly. But we're doing this setup, guys, for a full-on Amiga operating system. We can see it just here. What we're going to do is just close out of AmiKit X for now. On the bottom left-hand side, you're going to find a little cog with an eye in it, which is obviously the logo of AmiKit X. If we just go to left-click on Shutdown and shut down AmiKit. Okay, so next up, what we're going to do is look at FlowerPot. Now, as I mentioned near the start of the video, we're going to need a program called FlowerPot, which you can actually buy through the AmiKit website. If I double left-click on FlowerPot, this is what you're going to get. We just need to press install on this. And if you should get a pop-up about making changes to your device, just left-click on yes. And just remember, without FlowerPot, it's very unlikely you're going to be able to install Amiga OS 4.1. Okay, we're just going to uncheck Launch FlowerPot, go to Finish. Now what we're going to do is just go onto that FlowerPot logo. We can see it's just appeared there. Looks like some sort of poppy. If we right click on there, open file location, we're going to find a ROMs folder just here. Now if it's done its job, you're going to find all of your Amiga files in there, as we got from Amiga Forever. Just pay attention, that classic install CD should also be in here. So what we're going to do next then is open up FlowerPot. So just double left click this one. And we're going to go to install OS 4. Okay, and again, if you fancy a full screen for this process, which I'm about to do, very simple. We're using WinUAE, so it's just a case of either pressing F12 or the FN and F12 button together. From here, we're going to go to display. And under settings, make sure set to full screen for this. And at full screen at the top, I'm going to just drop this down to 1920 by 1080. And then going to go to OK. Okay, so as we can see, we got Amiga OS in the background just there. It looks pretty dated, but we can actually clean up the resolution shortly. What we're next going to do is go to install Amiga OS 4.1 Final Edition. Just left click on this one. Next thing we're going to see is local preferences. Now in my case, what I'm going to do is using my cursor, which is actually controlling the Amiga-esque cursor you can see on the screen, is look for English. So I'm going to select English, British, English native name. Okie dokes. Next thing I'm going to do is select the language. So obviously depending on the language you speak, in my case obviously going to be English. Or I can select English, British. If you realise you've selected the wrong language, you can actually go to the bottom here in clear languages, and that will literally clear everything you just entered. Let's go through this again. So we got British English, and we're going to go to use. Okay, you will now be asked to select your keyboard type and other input preferences. Proceed, left click. Okie doke, so this looks a little bit daunting, but what this is doing, as we know, different keyboards around the world has got different layouts. We also got at the bottom here, classic Amiga keyboard, and also the option to swap the Alt and Amiga key. So that's entirely up to you. Under keyboard, I'm just going to pull this down, and I'm going to find British just here. If I left click on this one, we can also change the mouse speed, the wheel multiplier, that's entirely up to you. But I'm going to go to use. Workbench will now open, proceed. Okay, so this is Flower Pot. It looks a little bit messy, but it's not going to be like this. And this is very temporary what we're doing. What we're going to do is just where it says don't panic, click me. Just double left click there. And this should bring you into thank you for purchasing Flower Pot. We're going to press enter on this part. Work on an installation, please wait. So we're just going to wait for this. We're going to go down to next and just left click on this one. And we also want to check I have read and agreed to the license agreement. We're going to go to next, next, and we're going to make sure Amiga 4000 is actually selected here, which it should be by default. We're going to go to next, next, and everything else you see, we're literally just going to continue pressing next. Okay, now this is the painful part, so we're going to wait for Amiga OS 4.1 to install, so around 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so as it says, system has been fertilized. Now we can either press Control plus F11 to quit out of this like it's telling us to do, or we can actually go back into WinUAE by pressing the F12 button or FN and F12 button together. But regardless, we need to close out of this. Okay, so I actually press Control, my FN key and my F11 key all together, and that's just exited out. So that's it, we're done. So what we're going to do then is just open up Flower Pot again and launch. Okay, let's just make this into a full screen again. So FN and F12. I'm going to go back to display and I'm going to go to full screen 1920 by 1080. I'm also going to go down to settings and again go to full screen, RTG full screen. I'm then going to save these configurations so I don't have to keep going back here all the time. So to do this, I'm going to go to configurations, which you can find at the top left under settings. And just here, I'm going to make sure the default Flower Pot mounted. What I'm going to do just here is save. If I then go to OK. Okie doke, so Amiga OS 4.1 is working just fine. I won't investigate that, I'll leave that for you to play around with and do what you got to do with it. But I thought to myself at this point, let's just show you how to use game images. So we got a game just here, this is cable, this is a .adf file, which is pretty much an Amiga floppy disk. I'm going to just boot up Amiga OS again. So I'm going to do this by launching it through FlowerPot and launch. Okay, so we're back inside of Amiga OS. What I'm going to do is press FN in F12, and that's going to bring up WinUAE. Now, technically, you can actually load in WHD load games in Amiga OS 4.1, but that's not the purpose of this video. I'm literally just doing this just so you can find that you can play games one way or another if you've got this far of the video. So to do this, what we're going to do is go over to floppy drives. Floppy drives DF0, DF1, DF2, DF3. Each one of these represents a floppy disk drive, a virtual floppy disk drive. If we go up to the DF0 drive just here, if I just left click on those little dots, I'm going to find my ADF game, which is of course on my desktop. If I scroll down, here's my game cable. I'm just going to double left click that one. Now, as we know, cable, or as some of you might know, cable is a one disc game. Some Amiga games might have up to 20 discs. Some are ridiculous like that. If that's the case, let's just say, for example, actually, your game has got 3 or 4 discs. What you're going to do is load up each one of these DFs. So, for example, disc 1 is going to go into DF0. Disc 2 is going to go into DF1. Anyways, once you pop those into those floppy drives, all we need to do then is configure a controller. So some games might run from port 1, some might run for port 2. By memory, port 2 is normally the port to use for joysticks. So what we're going to do is just go down to input on the side just there, and we're going to drop this down just here, and I can find my Xbox controller just here. It's listed as X input. Next thing I'm going to do is just go to game ports. Just here we got port 1 is Windows mouse. Of course, most Amiga games would require you to left click on the tank mouse if that's what you used back in the day. So we do need a mouse connected. Under port 2, I'm going to just make sure my Xbox controller is connected, which it is. Once I've done this, what I'm going to do is just hit reset. And my controller is working just fine. And once you finish with your game, just make sure that you remove it. So to do that, just go back to floppy drives and go to eject. Otherwise, if you don't do it and you boot up Amiga OS again, this game will likely boot up again, which you don't want. So another thing to mention is configurations. Just always make sure you save your settings, which in my case, I've been saving it to flowerpot.hdf just here, second one down. And that's it for today's Ultimate Amiga OS 4.1 setup guide for Windows. As we know, this is also available for other operating systems as well as Windows, which I've been using today. Anyways, check out my other emulation guides for Amiga. I've covered Amiga a hell of a lot in the past, but I thought I'd just get that one out there today. Just so some of you out there who want to experiment with Amiga OS 4.1, well, you can actually do it now. At some point, I'll probably do WHD load and how to load that in with Amiga OS 4.1. Anyways, if you liked today's video, hit notifications, subscribe and like so you don't miss upcoming retro emulation content here on my channel, just Jamie. Also check me out on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. But until next time, stay retro.